afterwards. There you go. You just got the notice. It is being recorded. It is now being recorded. Now, we would love to hear from you. So please do post any questions or thoughts in the chat box, and we will get to them during the Q&A session a bit later on. Now, we've got a great lineup for you today, and we'll go through and you'll be meeting all of our speakers very soon. But we'll be delving into the world of the Global Muslim Philanthropy Fund. But to kickstart proceedings, I would first like to invite someone who's been instrumental behind this whole series of events, behind this initiative on Islamic social finance, for some opening remarks. So may I request from Saudi Arabia, because he is performing Umrah, and we're very lucky and fortunate to have him join us today, Dr. Ahmed Al-Maraki, who's a special advisor to the UN Secretary General, to say a few words. Dr. Al-Maraki.
Thank you. Now I can, because I tried to unmute, but because the host mute me and I cannot unmute. So now he unmute me. Anyway, thank you, Basit, for your introduction. And I would like to thank everyone, and especially Sukwa and ISDB as well. My intervention will be in Arabic, so please allow me to speak in Arabic, and anyone want to, for the translation, they can do the translation. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أصحاب السعادة، سيدات السادة، نرحب بكم في الندوة الخامسة من ضمن سلسلة الندوات في الحوار الدولي دور التمويل الاجتماعي الإسلامي في تحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة، حيث كانت الندوات الثلاث الأولى عن الخلفيات حول عمل آليات وماهية التمويل الاجتماعي الإسلامي، كما كانت الندوة الرابعة والتي كانت بعنوان صندوق تثمير ممتلكات الأوقاف نموذج التنمية المستدامة، والتي حقيقة شارك فيها كوكبة من المختصين في الأوقاف. هذه كانت الندوة الرابعة. واليوم طبعا عندنا الندوة الخامسة، والتي سوف نتطرق فيها عن نموذج مميز في تنفيذ التمويل الاجتماعي الإسلامي، وأحد قصص النجاح في الشراكة بين البنك الإسلامي للتنمية وأحد منظمات الأمم المتحدة، وأعني هنا اليونيسيف، حيث نتطلع حقيقة الاستفادة من هذه التجارب لتكون نموذج يمكن أن نبني عليه آلية دولية تعين في تحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة من خلال التمويل الاجتماعي الإسلامي. وطبعا إذا أشكر البنك التنمية وكذلك لسكو على ما يبذلونه من جهد حقيقة في إنجاح هذه المبادرة، التي أسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى القدير أن تحقق الهدف الذي وضعت من أجله، وهو تحقيق التنمية المستدامة للناس الذين هم في أمس الحاجة إلى العيش بكرامة. أصحاب السعادة، السيدات والسادة، لا يخفى عليكم أن وجود عمل منظم بين عدة شركاء، سواء كان هؤلاء الشركاء منظمات إنسانية أو حكومات أو شركات قطاع خاص، حيث يساهم كل منهم بخبراته الفريدة ودرايته الفنية في تحقيق الأهداف المشتركة وتجاوز طبعا العراقيل بأكثر كفاءة وقوة من العمل الفردي. تعد الشراكة مع أصحاب المصلحة المتعددين هي بمثابة فرصة أساسية للتعلم من الجهات الأخرى الفاعلة ولدفع الأهداف المرسومة، سواء كانت التنمية الاقتصادية أو التنمية الاجتماعية أو القضاء على الفقر وحملات الإغاثة إلى آخره، وذلك من خلال تسخير القوة الإبداعية للجهات الفاعلة المختلفة والاستفادة من خبراتهم ودرايتهم. تشجع كذلك الشراكات بين أصحاب المصلحة المتعددين في اتخاذ إجراءات عاجلة وذات مردود عالي الجودة لتجاوز المصاعب والأزمات القائمة. كما يتطلب تحقيق هذه الشراكات توفير خدمات لوجستية، اتصالات فورية وثابتة مع كافة الأطراف الفاعلة والعاملين في المجال العمل الإنساني. طبعا آليات التنسيق والجودة وصياغة برامج ومبادرات مشتركة، وتعود ذلك بالخير والنماء على المجتمع. الشراكة الاستراتيجية بين المؤسسات الإنسانية والخيرية وكذلك أصحاب المصلحة المتعددين أصبحت من أهم الأعمدة التي يرتكز عليها العمل الإنساني والخيري، وأصبحت مع تطور الفكر الإنساني ثقافة ضرورية حقيقة لتنمية المجتمعات الفقيرة. وفي ندوتنا اليوم والتي هي بعنوان الصندوق العالمي الإسلامي الخيري للأطفال، والتي يشارك فيها كوكبة من المختصين من بنك التنمية الإسلامي واليونيسف، حيث ستستعرض الندوة الشراكة الناجحة بين الطرفين، والتي حقيقة تعتبر نموذج مميز للنجاح، كما تطلع كذلك للمناقشة المثمرة من خلال طرح الأسئلة على المتحدثين، والذي أشكرهم على جهودهم ومشاركتهم معنا في هذه الندوة، كما الشكر موصول للحضور الكريم، وشكرا. Back to you, Bas.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ali Maraki, and of course, Umrah Mabrur to yourself. Thank you for your opening remarks. It truly is a unique initiative that yourself and all the colleagues at ISDB and Esquire have put together in these series of talks, and we hope that everyone who attends today will find it useful and intuitive, just like we have in the previous sessions that passed. Now, as mentioned earlier, and as Dr. Maraki said, today we will be exploring the Global Muslim Philanthropy Fund for Children, which is a joint initiative between UNICEF and the Islamic Development Bank. Launched in 2019, the fund is a unique Sharia-compliant global platform which enables Muslim philanthropists to achieve the child-related SDGs with their zakat and sadaqah. So what better way to start than by understanding a little bit more about the fund itself? What exactly does it do? To give us some insight, please welcome Abdurrahman Gandour, who is the Senior Advisor for Partnerships at UNICEF. He brings over 30 years of experience with international organizations, alternating between representative, political, development, humanitarian, and communications positions, working at country, regional, and global levels. Abdurrahman.
Thank you, Basit. Thank you very much for this introduction. And it was a pleasure to join you today and speak about this very exciting new initiative, which is living almost its third year. As we all know, Islamic giving charitable action exists since the birth of Islam over 1,500 years ago. Zakat, Sadaqah, whom we're going to talk about in a few minutes, and Awqas and Waqfs, which was the subject of the last sessions, have been remarkable institutions in the Muslim world, which have achieved incredible things, including for children. We all know the work that Muslim Philanthropy has done with orphans, specifically with health and education. This has a wonderful history. Is this enough? Is this all that we can do? No, more can be done to adapt to our modern world, to harness the full potential of this Islamic giving that is so wonderful and institutionalized. We can do more for children to respond to, as was said, life-saving humanitarian situations, and to try and reach the sustainable development goals, which are child-related, and the core commitment for children that UNICEF has set. So for that, what we need is to move to the next level, to respond to the modern exigencies. We need a structure and institution which is more structured to maximize impact, more globally coordinated for scale, much more fully measurable with clear objectives, with clear evaluations for improved efficiency, and more visible. We know about the discreteness of Muslim giving, but visibility is also important for recognition. In other words, we need to be more strategic. How I would have loved to have an institution such as the Global Muslim Philanthropy Fund for Children. When I was working in various situations in my life, at some point I was the head of Doctors Without Borders for the Gulf Office, resource mobilization. I had to go, door to door to ask individual donors to help and support health programs for children. It would have been so much easier to have an institution which would respond to all the requirements. In Sudan, a few years ago, when I was working in the UN Coordination Office, there were a lot of Muslim initiatives, a lot from the Muslim world, but they were very much uncoordinated. We struggled so much to make sure that all of it, reached the same pool, and that collaboration more than competition prevailed. How we would have loved to have in institutions such as the GMPFC at the time. And more recently, when I was the special representative of Unicef for Libya, we worked so hard to help migrant children coming from the Sahel region, crossing Libya before going into this perilous journey across the Mediterranean. They were stuck in Libya. And all we could do is get either Western funds or individual donations here and there from some people scattered left and right. It was difficult. It was not easy. And if we had such an institution, again, I think we would have done remarkable things for migrant children. So for all these reasons, we welcome this. And recognizing these challenges, this is how 2 years ago, literally 2 years ago, the Islamic Development Bank president of the time, Dr. Bandar Hajjar, and UNICEF executive director, Henrietta Ford, established the Global Muslim Philanthropy Fund for Children by signing its charter during the UN General Assembly week, just about 2 years ago, as I said, in 2019. What are the key benefits for this? Well, UNICEF and the Islamic Development Bank together have 120 years of experience. They can increase the scale of the work throughout the globe. There's program expertise from both institutions, much higher visibility. We talked about visibility, including through the governing council of the fund. And it is Sharia compliance, which will help in harnessing and building trust with Muslim philanthropists. Since its beginning, only 2 years ago, 2 founding partners have been very generous donors to the fund. His Excellency Abdulaziz Al Ghurair and the Foundation for Refugee Education Fund, as well as the King Salman Humanitarian Aid and Relief Center with Dr. Abdullah Al-Rabi'i, have both spearheaded on almost $20 million of aid for the fund, which has helped us kickstart our programs. And programs we have already, 3 programs, one in Pakistan through the King Salman Relief Fund, of approximately $5 million, where we work on health and immunization for under 5 children, but not only to the Pakistanis, but also to all the migrant populations. Also in Bangladesh, we have a fund that we started, a program that we started, which is $4.2 million from the KS Relief Fund as well, helping Rohingya refugees and the host populations, including on nutrition. And finally, in Jordan, which we will present in a few minutes, a 2.9 million fund from the Abdulaziz Al Ghurair Foundation to help Syrian refugees. So we have programs that have started and that we will be presenting, at least one of them later today. This is just the start, as we said. 2 years is not much, but the mechanisms of the fund have been established. We have a governing council now, second meeting soon, and we have a program committee which can help with the expertise. So we now need to move into the operational phase of the 3 programs which we presented, and we need to identify major new projects, identify to fund and to implement. And we have started to reach out to Muslim philanthropists through the summer. More needs to be done. Hopefully, in the next rounds, we will focus on new programs, probably related to the state of Palestine and to the COVID crisis, obviously. And we need to show the success of the current programs to harness new programs, because we know that success generates success. We need to diversify donors to reach to a new geographical scale, because there's so much untapped potential, as we said, in the Muslim philanthropy world. And we will try also new fundraising platforms, including digital platforms, in order to also use modern mechanisms to gather support. We will work on a new communication and resource mobilization strategy. All these are the plans for the next few months in order to move to scale and efficiency with this glorious fund. There's a lot, as we said, that needs to be done, but we can be ambitious, we can be bold. After all, this is for children. And when it's for children, the sky's the limit.
As Abdurrahman was mentioning, the fund is a medium for both zakat and sadaqah. Both are traditional and well-known means of giving, of course, in the Muslim world. And the fund essentially provides a platform to utilize both zakat and sadaqah in a strategic manner. And with that in mind, I'd like to invite the other key partner behind this fund from the Islamic Development Bank side. Hussein Qadri to the floor now. Saeed is the Acting Director of Resilience and Social Development at the Islamic Development Bank and leads the bank engagement in the areas of climate change, fragility, conflict and violence, gender empowerment, and youth development. Saeed, over to you, sir. Saeed, we hope we still have you with us.
Yes, thank you very much. I was just asking to be unmuted. It's very good. I think there's a good technical team that's there rapidly taking care of these things. Just wanted to say that Assalamu alaikum, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I really appreciate us all getting together. And this is really a testament to the UN agencies, to Islamic Solidarity Fund, Islamic finance support departments, and everybody else that has come together to organize this. Catching on from what Abdurrahman was mentioning, and just to sort of extend some of those arguments and some of the areas that we wanted to capture, I wanted to bring it back to the purposes of Islamic finance. And one of the most pure versions of Islamic finance is on zakat. And as Abdurrahman mentioned, that zakat is a unique form. It's a required charity for members of the Muslim faith, and it's actually conceptualized as a right. It's a right of the poor and the underprivileged to have a small but consistent 2.5% take from the wealth of the more well-off that who God has blessed. And it's almost like a fundamental form of social financing for the benefit of the poor and the underprivileged in general. That's just one important point. And because it is 2.5% on wealth, which is arguably more than just income, that's the reason why amounts and the potential to be able to contribute are far larger. The scales are very different. And that's basically the spot where we want to come in and tap into that, so that we can actually make full use and divert it in a manner which is structured, organized, result-oriented. Many observant high net worth individuals in the Muslim world, both within the Muslim majority countries and even outside of the Muslim majority countries, are searching for impactful, trustworthy mechanisms to deliver their zakat, as well as their sadaqah, as well as their contributions through the general charity. The bank, Islamic Development Bank, through the Global Muslim Philanthropy Fund for Children, is very uniquely situated. The ISDB is both a trusted partner of donors and it has all the necessary legal, compliant, organizational fine-tuning items there. It's an international multilateral organization with a large track record of these areas. And what can be said about UNICEF? UNICEF is the world's foremost wide footprint has an unmatched track record of reaching vulnerable communities and underprivileged children all over the place. So the coming together of these two institutions really offers a fantastic potential, and we're just getting started. We've been able to complete, as Abdurrahman was mentioning, we've been able to complete a significant number of setup items, operations manual, program committee structures, governing council, subcommittees, resource mobilization plans, action plans, communication plans, outreach activities, and now we're in the operationalization phase. And through that, we would be able to go into growth and diversification phases as well. These are extremely important because we feel that the coming together of such a partnership is the real potential to aid in achieving SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, 1 to 5 to more, 13 and elsewhere as well, compared to informal giving or giving which is generally is immediate, but it is not immediately relevant or immediately observant of that. So besides these items of zakat and sadaqah, it's just appropriate that we talk about Islamic social financing. That's a term that the Islamic Development Bank Institute is very proud of coining, and those are areas in which we basically want to make sure that that we focus on. We're very honored to actually have some long-standing, loyal partners from the very get-go. Sponsors such as mentioned, King Salman Relief Center for Humanitarian Agencies, and then of course Abdulaziz Al Ghurair Refugee Education Fund, represented by His Excellency Abdulaziz Al Ghurair himself. That's where we can see the potential of both NGOs, foundations, development banks, institutions, philanthropists coming through. It's a proof of concept that is beginning to pay off right now, and you will hear some results about that. I think that generally covers a lot of the initial items that I wanted to talk about right now, but there'll be plenty of other opportunities to go into more details of it. I'll hand it over back to you, Basit. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Saeed, again, for those extremely insightful thoughts there. And like you said, it's a really important topic, zakat and sadaqah, making sure we align them and utilize that money in the correct manner, which is what this fund is ultimately trying to do. Now, as we're talking about zakat itself, it's very interesting to note that the very first commitment of $10 million was part of a strategic partnership with the Abdul Aziz Al Ghurair Refugee Education Fund, and was in fact made up entirely of zakat. So His Excellency Abdul Aziz Al Ghurair is a member now of the governing council of the fund, along with, like Saeed was mentioning, UNICEF, ISDB, and the King Salman Humanitarian Aid and Relief Center. So to tell us more about this strategic partnership, please welcome Dr. Sonia Ben Jafar, the CEO of the Abdullah Al Ghurair Foundation for Education, which is one of the largest privately funded philanthropic education initiatives in the Arab world. Dr. Sonia.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to first extend my gratitude to UNICEF and the Islamic Development Bank group to provide this valuable platform that's so timely, so that we can look at Islamic financing instruments through a more strategic SDG conscious lens. You know, when I think of Islam, the central tenet, is giving. It's enshrined in not only sadaqah and zakat, charitable donations, waqf endowments. It's part of who Muslims are. Nearly a quarter of the world's population give. Ordinary people, salaried workers, even those who don't have much themselves, routinely, unquestionably, and generously give as just a part of a way of life. And so it's one of many things that, to me, define a Muslim community. And too often now, during these fast-paced, turbulent times, the money that's collected for an emergency, a crisis, a reaction, it's just too abrupt. When we look at a vast conflict that sends hundreds of thousands of men, women, and children washing up on distant shores, swapping their family certainty for a life in limbo in a tent, well, that pulls at our heartstrings, and we want to just give. But, I stand before you today not as another nonprofit searching for crisis funding or injections of cash and goodwill. Far from it. I actually have the privilege of working for His Excellency Abdulaziz Al Ghurair, and His Excellency has been, as you mentioned, a first supporter of the Global Muslim Philanthropy Fund for Children. And since its inception, we've been and continue to explore how Islamic financing can have a bigger impact. And so what do I mean by a bigger impact? I don't mean better tents, better food parcels, and better mobile clinics. I mean harnessing the power of Islamic financing to make a real change that's sustainable, that is committed to the Sustainable Development Goals. And so what does that mean for me? Well, the kind of changes in people, in communities, in societies, so they don't need further support. I'm talking about a new strategic way of thinking about how Islamic financing can be an instrument of long-lasting transformation, taking people out of poverty and distress, laying the foundations for lives of dignity and purpose. So a very good example from our experience is this one young Muslim woman in Jordan. Her name is Nawal Suleiman, from an impoverished area. She benefited directly from the Refugee Education Fund His Excellency established. She attended the Luminous School and graduated with a certificate in hand. She then found a job with a salary that exceeds $25,000 a month USD while still living in her community. So not only is she a role model to others, and she promotes education, she stands tall, contributing to her community. But what's more is now she's eligible to give sadaqah, and zakat. So to me, that's sustainable Islamic financing in action. And that's a great example that we can think of when we talk about sustainability of impact of Islamic giving. And I hope we can do a lot more of that together. So from our vantage point at the foundation and at the Refugee Education Fund, we're deeply committed to SDGs goals 4 and 8 related to education and upskilling for careers, as well as SDG 17, which reflects the spirit of partnership. And there's a huge demographic bubble of young people out there, and we need to start thinking and acting together to ensure that they can find jobs, create businesses, become self-supporting and productive. And that is an alternative to becoming objects of charity. And that's what we want for our next generation. And if we look at the Nexus model from the United Nations, these particular SDG goals for 8 and 17 together actually extend to others, because when we promote those, we promote peace, we reduce poverty, and we promote gender equity. And so I look forward to working with you to transform Islamic compliant social financing mechanisms into recognized funding instruments in the global public in line with promoting sustainability. We're committed to co-constructing an ecosystem that promotes regional strategic philanthropy. And that doesn't mean that an individual philanthropist has to abandon their own priority project. Far from it. What it says is we know that there's a large group of Muslim philanthropists who want to engage to maximize impact by collectively leveraging resources and having greater measurable impact with their own funds. The reality is that not every philanthropist has to create their own foundation. That's not what we're advocating. What we're advocating is to collaborate and work together, and this fund allows for that so that we can have a greater joint impact while respecting individual priorities, as those examples of the projects showed. So we're committed to nurturing cross-sectoral, local, regional, and international partnerships and collaborations with donors. But we also want to ensure that we promote homegrown approaches for solutions that work for local communities and give them the dignity and respect that Islamic giving promotes and embodies. It's not about importing solutions. And so for us, we've achieved a few things in the last few years with our own refugee education fund, where we have had collaborations with regional and development partners. And so we've been able to study the best mechanisms of collection, management, and delivery for critical funding for sustainable development. And we found ways to make use of immense potential of Islamic financing. So we consider it an investment in individuals and communities in a more sustainable way. And so we're not so reactive, but we want to place preventative measures in place. And His Excellency Abdulaziz Al-Hurer not only committed his money to this fund, which of course is important, but for me, what's even more impressive is that he committed his time. And as you saw from those pictures, you saw him actually at the camps talking to the children, talking to the NGO actors to see what was going on and how we could do better. So it provides opportunities for better livelihoods of Arab youth, and it mobilizes others to do the same. And that's part of his family legacy. And so as we enter our third year through various different mechanisms and partners, we have helped over 27,000 vulnerable young people by giving them the opportunity to hope, to elevate their own livelihoods. The projects that we have supported over the last 2.5 years were selected so that they could have a stepping stone to a brighter future. It is not a simple one-off. It is something where they can have an accredited market-driven course that directly leads to employment, or a program like Nawal Suleiman. It is a supportive educational filler that bridges the gap so that they can access schooling that they couldn't access before, so that they could get that better livelihood. So when we look at those over 27,000 vulnerable youth and partnerships with local and international organizations, all of that happened with an Islamic modality of financing. And in this particular case, as was mentioned before, it's a zakat fund. Now, that has a few implications in how we can operate. And one of those is a very lean way of operating so that most of the funds go directly to those kids. And I think that that is one of the advantages that Islamic financing has, because it is one of the biggest critiques of most fundraising for others that are not doing Islamic financing. And so when I think about the wealth of, Islamic financing, and I think about the World Bank and the ISDB's research showing that there's about $1 trillion in zakat collected annually. And then I think about the World Economic Forum reporting that there's 2.5 trillion annual gap in financing SDGs. Well, we've got a very big solution to a devastating problem that could be significant if we cultivate a culture of strategic giving within the generosity of Islamic giving, which, as you said, is very private and can remain private while still having a strategic collective impact. And so, when we strive today to address deep global recession, increased unemployment rates, rising extreme poverty levels that, we've not seen in 22 years, we're all struggling. And when I look at the statistics and the science of things that link matter, because I have a background in biochemistry, that's what I look at always, it helps me see the linkages between poverty, Islamic financing, and sustainability. And we know that when we have 1.2 billion children living in multidimensional poverty, and we have a 15% increase in the number of children living in deprivation in low and middle income countries, we actually need a different kind of financing solution. And I don't want to be yet another nonprofit leader calling for more funds. And I know that that's an inadequate action. And even though it's true that there's less inflow of pledges from traditional donors to developing countries, and reaching the vulnerable is becoming more and more difficult, it's also true that Islamic giving has financing mechanisms to provide the most vulnerable populations with long-term opportunities. And it's more like an investment than it is charity. And we can have all of those pieces that were spoken about earlier, that measurable impact, that strategic impact, the outcomes that we can actually go towards. And I'm confident that together we can transform and support the development in the region so that we can have those models. I'm just going to close on one small detail that I was thinking about the other day. When I was thinking about the Muslim countries, we make up 24.1% of the global population. And I look at that number and I think 24.1% of the globe holds a particular set of values that states we must give when we can. 24.1% of the entire world thinking that boys and girls learning trades, skills, expertise that helps them stand tall and proud on their own 2 feet to support their families and inspire each other simply just inspires me. And so I hope that together we'll be able to do more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sonia. It's always a pleasure to hear from you, and it's great to see those positive images and hear about the wonderful work that you're doing, and of course why we work together so well as well. Now, as we mentioned, the funds that were provided by His Excellency, the Zakat funds, are being used to support vulnerable Syrian refugee children to improve learning and well-being, and particularly to support their positive transition to adulthood. So to tell us a bit more about how the funds are being utilized, together with work that is actually going on in Jordan and the impact that your donations and all the funding is having over there, I'd like to welcome Tanya Chapusat, who is UNICEF's Jordan representative and has previously served as UNICEF's representative in Lebanon, Costa Rica, and Central African Republic. Tanya.
Well, first, thank you very much. And thank you for that inspirational speech right before mine. It was really interesting to listen to. And I really have to say, you got me motivated, and I'm already a motivated person on this issue. So thank you. I think before I start talking exactly how we've used the funds, and thank you for those funds, it may be to step back. I mean, I assume a lot of us already know quite a bit about Jordan, but it's always worth reiterating. So just to confirm, Jordan is one of the world's largest hosters of refugee populations. So there's an estimated 1.3 million Syrian refugees currently living in Jordan. But what people don't really know is amongst the 3.16 million children, that is both Jordanians, Syrians, and Palestinian children, nearly 500,000 of those are also multidimensional poor, so living in moderate poverty levels. And of that, we have 0.4 million who are also acutely poor. So I think when we talk about the situation of children in Jordan, it's important to remember we've talked a lot about the Syrian refugees, and clearly that is a critical, very vulnerable group of kids, but there is a bigger issue too of vulnerable children. And that bigger issue has only been further impacted in the last few years with the COVID crisis, because we continue to see economic indicators deteriorating, Jordanian debt levels are increasing, and unemployment only skyrocketing. So it is within this background that UNICEF Jordan was awarded the first grant under the Global Muslim Philanthropy Fund for Children. So first, to thank everybody for that. And to say that that fund was actually used to target vulnerable girls and boys, women and men, young women and men. And so how we ended up targeting is part of actually our ongoing program for the last 10 to 12 years with the Syrian crisis. So what we have is 23 districts within the country which have the highest proportions of vulnerable children and youth. So once again, to include not just Syrians, but also vulnerable Jordanians and Palestinians. And within those 23 districts, we also have 85% of the registered Syrian refugee population who lives in host communities. So not necessarily the kids who live inside the camps, but as you all know, or just to say, only 20% of refugees live in camps. The other 80% live in host communities. Within this framework, in 2015, UNICEF in Jordan launched a program called the Makani program, My Space program. The program has an objective of providing a multi-sectoral coherent response to education protection, psychosocial needs for conflict-affected children and youth in Jordan. So both the vulnerable Syrians, but also other children living in the community who would be impacted by this huge influx of refugees also. So the Makanis, the My Spaces centers provide a safe space for children to be able to access learning, support opportunities, but also protection services. And as a child comes into that center, they're also then able to be referred to other critical services that might be required. So it could also be things like mental health or just generally health services. In 2021, we currently have 140 Makani Centers, which are operated in Jordan. And these are operated both inside the refugee camps, as you saw in the pictures, but also within host communities and also informal tented settlements. So these are sort of people living in tents, primarily linked to agricultural opportunities. So sort of settlements around these, and particularly those children tend to be extremely vulnerable, the ones living in informal tented settlements. In 2019, the Al Ghurair Foundation for Education supported UNICEF to continue to invest in these Makani centers. And so specifically with the donation that was provided, UNICEF was able to continue to provide the services to approximately 10,000 children aged between the ages of 13 and 18. This support from the Global Muslim Philanthropy Fund continued then into 2021. And with that funding, we've been able to access about 4,200 children between the ages of 12 to 18 who have gone through these centers. So in addition to being able to support these 140 centers to provide this very integrated services, we've also, with the financing provided, been able to provide to 1,600 vulnerable girls and boys a monthly cash transfer. And this cash transfer, which is called the Hajati program, is actually linked to education and the impact of poverty on education, and helps vulnerable families ensure that their children really continue to go to school. The grant has also helped us, as was being described by the previous presenter, by the doctor, support over 500 vulnerable young girls and women to access this very high level accredited, market-oriented technical and vocational educational opportunities. So as you heard, there's some very strong centers here, and we were able to support that these children could access those opportunities, and as was described, have then be directly linked to employment. So that has been a very, very appreciated contribution, and one that, as was described, allows people to become independent and take on their own responsibilities and also give back to their communities as described. In addition to being able to attend these types of centers, there's also youth were able to go through these large programs that we have on social entrepreneurships, which come with also sort of business design and business mentoring and business support opportunities. Maybe just to take a few minutes to reflect back on the last 18 months, because as we described, when Unicef in Jordan received the grant from the Muslim Philanthropy Bank, we were entering, or we were coming towards, the COVID crisis. And what one has to understand of what happened in Jordan over the last 18 months is actually Jordan was one of the 14 countries in the world that has had the longest period of school closures. So whilst other countries quite quickly opened up their schools, unfortunately, Jordan, until literally 2 weeks ago, had their schools pretty much closed for the whole last 18 months. This clearly has a massive impact, not only on learning for children, and as we know, learning for vulnerable children is severely impacted in this situation. But because of that closures of school, we've also seen negative coping mechanisms go significantly turn for the worse. So numbers in terms of child labor, early marriage, domestic violence, and mental health have clearly been significantly impacted over the last 18 months. But in that whole framework too, what has been incredible, I think, is it has only reinforced for us the importance of the Makani program and how successful that can be. So whilst physically maybe the centers had to be closed for long periods of time, what we found was we were very quickly able to shift the way we delivered. So move to a remote delivery service. And it's here that you really see the value of these centers and the staff in particular who work in these centers, because it was with this committed staff who had these incredibly strong ties to their communities and the children who access those centers that they were able to continue to provide support to these kids to be able to navigate the impacts of these very difficult situations like long-term closures, lockdowns, loss of livelihoods for their families. Also, as all learning went online, these Makani staff center personnel were critical in ensuring that children continued to learn, because online education requires access to internet, access to data, being able to navigate the internet, all of these things, which is particularly difficult for very vulnerable children. And it was really thanks to these Makani centers and the staff working in them that we were able to support the children to either access all these social these social media sites or internet sites that would be provided by the government. But also we were able to print out a lot of the material that we had developed and provide support to distance learning physically through these centers. Also, in addition, I think when we described the cash transfer that was being provided, this unconditional cash transfer, but where we link it to hopefully getting children to remain in school, has been all the more critical under the last period, because as families lost further income, this minor, what could be considered in the bigger picture, not that huge, but cash transfer to the family did make a considerable difference to make sure that children continue to access learning through remote mechanisms. So as we now have entered in the last 2 weeks, the return to school, we're looking again to the Makani system to really be able to support the children as they go back to learning, and especially be able to support the vulnerable children who in some cases have not had any school for the last 18 months, to make sure that they get the necessary support and don't completely drop out of the system. So it's really with a great thanks that we have to thank the Global Muslim Philanthropy Fund and Al Ghurair Foundation in particular for this very important grant that has had incredible impact over the last couple of years and last months in particular. So thank you very much again.
Thank you very much, Tanya. It's amazing work that you're doing, and we hope the kids can go back to school. Just here, the children have gone back. Mine went back yesterday. It was actually a blessing in disguise because I've got a bit of peace and quiet in the house for once after a very long summer. But I'm sure many a parent feels the same sentiment. Just to remind everybody, you can put your Q&As in the chat box, and we're going to be coming to a Q&A session a bit later on, so do that, and our panelists are all with us to answer those questions. Now, as we saw there with Tanya and the example in Jordan, projects like this can really help to change lives. And our next speaker is someone who has actually experienced what it is like to live in a refugee camp, be supported by a UNICEF project in the form of a back to school campaign, and with the right help and support, now finds herself in the UK, where, alhamdulillah, she recently graduated in international politics. Absolutely amazing. Please welcome someone who was listed as one of Time's 30 most influential teens of 2017 and UNICEF's youngest global ambassador, Mazoon Al-Mahalan, a Syrian refugee, beg your pardon, and education activist who offers a powerful, credible, and authentic voice on education in emergencies. Mazoon.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. It's so great to be here with all of you, and it is such a great pleasure. And I'm so thrilled to discuss a very important topic, which is Islamic social financing for achieving the SDGs, in particular to talk about the Global Muslim Philanthropy Fund. So as it has been mentioned, I am originally from Syria, and I know the first-hand experience when somebody is in need or when somebody is forced to flee his or her homeland. And this what has happened to me as Mazoon and my family, like millions of Syrians who were forced to flee their homeland in 2013. So I was in a situation to live in refugee camps. So the life has been really challenging to me and to my family. Of course, we had many challenges, but alhamdulillah, we had hope, and we didn't give up. I know the camp was one of the hardest experiences in my life, but I found hope, and I always believed there is a light, even when there is darkness. And of course, this cannot be done without the help of many people who were supporting refugees and refugee camps, and including education. So UNICEF and their partners, and of course the contribution of zakat by Muslims, and all of this has helped basically millions of Syrian refugees to find hope in refugee camps. So for me, when I found education in refugee camps, it really has made me a stronger person to face the challenges, because I do believe when we have education, we can go and rebuild our homeland one day, even if we are suffering. Of course, we didn't choose to suffer. No one chooses to live in refugee camps. No one chooses basically to be in a situation where he or she is deprived from their rights. So for me, the greatest motivation was to do something for my country in the future. And without having education, without having enough support, maybe I am not Mazoon who's now speaking on behalf of millions, which is something I'm so proud of. And I think to be a voice for millions is something means a lot to me. So talking about zakat, which is a topic which is close to the hearts of every Muslim, and zakat for us something really meaningful, because of course it is one of the 5 pillars of Islam, which means it is super important, and it is a duty on every Muslim who can, because it is imposed on us, and we must do it when we can. And even the Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him, he encouraged us to do zakat and sadaqah, even if we sometimes don't have money or will to do so, by smiling. He said, "Tabassumika fi wajhi akhika sadaqa." Smiling in front of the face of your brother is a charity. This is a great sign to encourage every Muslim to give when they also to support each other, because zakat teaches us to have compassion, to have empathy, to have contribution, to also to collaborate with each other, and also to to enforce the kindness, love between the people of societies. Because once we support each other, we can have unity, and definitely we can solve a lot of problems, including poverty, because zakat has proved through history, and definitely until now and for every time, it is one of the greatest means that solves poverty, which is many societies suffer from. So Allah, when he actually imposed on us zakat, it is basically to make balance. So of course, we cannot all have wealth. This is for us to know the suffering of each other, to be responsible towards each other. And talking about zakat is something really big, but this is what means to every Muslim. And of course, it means to me as Muslim, because we have learned at such a young age. And when we read about the life of our Prophet, and also reading on Quran, Allah has mentioned many times in Quran the importance of zakat, and it is one of the greatest sign and characteristic of the true believer of Allah. Because when Allah gives us a blessing or wealth, it is not only for us, it is also there is part of it to support your sisters and brothers who are in need. And also this leads me to a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad as well, peace be upon him, when he said, أحب الناس إلى الله أنفعهم للناس. The ones that Allah loves the most is the ones who are beneficial to others. So I'm mentioning this to encourage Muslims to give when they can, because it really can changes lives of all of us. I was one of those people basically who were in need. So people who from my country, they are still in need as well, because basically the ones who are suffering, they are in severe need to all of us to unite together and to give when we can. And also what we can mention about zakat, also it is not about giving, people to benefit them for food or shelter, which is something really important, and definitely it is part of what we give as Muslims, but also to focus on the challenges that are facing human beings, and like education, because we know education suffers so much, and education is so important for societies to develop, and also to uplift individuals to be active and to contribute positively in their societies. So zakat definitely can be done in a way to support these issues like education. And education has been suffering so much even before COVID-19, but we all know during the pandemic, education has been impacted negatively. And unfortunately, many children, they are now dropped out from education. They cannot catch up with their learning because they don't have access to internet, they don't have access to laptops, they don't have access to facilities that can enable them to have their education during crisis like the pandemic. So I think it is so important to continue to collaborate together. And the Muslim Philanthropy Fund, which is something I really appreciate so much, and I do believe can make a huge impact on the lives of all of us. So seeing all of you working together and also speaking about how we can actually solve these problems that children and human beings are facing currently, it really gives me hope, and it makes me so hopeful for the people who are suffering at the minute, because they really need us. And so just I want to thank all of you for everything that you are doing, and I really appreciate it so much. And also we hope to continue to work for solving the problems. I know we cannot solve all the problems very quickly, but definitely it is not impossible. And of course, when we have a trust in Allah in everything we do, because I know through zakat and sadaqah and everything we do as Muslims, it is for the sake of Allah. This is not for the sake to just to give, but also we will be rewarded in the day of judgment, and also inshallah in Jannah we will definitely get this rewarded, because when you give even a tiny bit, Allah will actually maximize this and will reward you even more. So everyone is listening to me, I hope all of you can really contribute and help everyone is in need. And just thank you so much indeed.
No, thank you, Mazuna. You can see the comments coming in the chat box. Alhamdulillah, everyone's so inspired by you and by your journey and what you've gone through. It's something that we pray nobody goes through what you went through yourself, or you and your family went through. But alhamdulillah, the resolve, the strength that you have coming out of that. And mashallah, you're an international politics graduate now, so we know you're an advocate and passionate about children's rights and education for young girls. And inshallah, we hope that inspiration and knowledge can pass on to many, many young children. And they can see it as a beacon, inshallah, as well. Well, we are going to our Q&A session, so do please remember to put the question and answers in the chat box. I've actually got a question for you, Mazoon, straight away. Actually, as you were talking, and I'm going to take the liberty as the moderator here. And it's just, obviously, as you went through that journey, so Hamdi, everything's fine, families living in Syria, and then this war breaks out, which displaces you. So when you were in that camp, knowing that there is zakat, knowing that there is sadaqah, and there's this, a billion Muslims in the world who are giving, was that one thing that perhaps gave you some hope that, there are people there who will support? Because essentially you gave up everything, right? You've given up your home, your livelihood. Well, parents, obviously, at that time, they can no longer work, go to a refugee camp. Was that one thing, that knowledge that, yes, there is this form of Islamic giving that the Muslim community is giving, that will at least get us through this stage? Is it, how was that, and how did that work in your thinking at the time?
Yes, thank you. So this is such a very important question. Of course, one of the things that helped me to face the challenges is my trust in Allah, because definitely for me, anything it happens to me, even bad or good, I know there is good behind it, because Allah puts us in a situation that we can really afford it and we can face it. And I know when we are patient, because patience also is a very important thing in us, in Islam, in our faith. So once we are patient, indeed, the journey will end in a beautiful way. And of course, knowing my religion in a way, like I know there are Muslims who maybe care about us, who know about what we are suffering, so they will definitely help us. Of course, this gives me hope, because we know in Islam we have, everyone is a Muslim, like they are our brothers and sisters, and we care about their suffering and their challenges, and we try to help them as much as we can. So definitely this is one of the things kept me so hopeful. And of course, religion in general, not only thinking about zakat, of course, it was one of the greatest means to keep me positive, not only in the past, but of course in my daily life, because every day we have challenges. But most importantly, we have to, for me, worship is one of the greatest ways, to be really, really positive, through prayers, through reading Quran. So yes, I think thinking about the Islamic pillars and like prayers, zakat, all of this, definitely a great way to be motivated and to be hopeful.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mazoon. I also have a question for Abdurrahman. We spoke to Abdurrahman earlier on, and we were talking about visibility, being visible with our work, and also working strategically. But at the same time, we have the concept of give with the right hand so that the left doesn't know. But at the same time, we also have a great tradition in Islam of the companions of the Prophet. We know they used to compete with each other to do good, and they did this publicly, right? And there's a great example of Abu Bakr and Umar, where I think they're collecting funds for an expedition, and Umar says, "I'm going to do more than Abu Bakr, because I know Abu Bakr was the most generous, or they knew Abu Bakr was the most generous." So he brought half his wealth. And when Abu Bakr came, and obviously Umar's tried to outdo Abu Bakr said, "Well, actually, I've brought everything for Allah, for the expedition. I've left Allah and His Rasul for my family." So we have this concept of competing to do good, and that's what we should be encouraging people, right? Use this platform as a means to compete in good actions.
You're absolutely right, and I'm glad you raised this because, of course, the principle of being discreet and the right hand not knowing what the left hand is doing, vice versa, is absolutely critical to Islam, because you have to be modest in your generosity, and that's a beautiful principle, beautiful one. But if you want to really mobilize funds, you have to think of, I wouldn't say competition, but emulation. Lead by example. If people see examples of wonderful, generous donors who are giving to worthy causes that actually have impact, scale, and help, and which are measurable, then others would be inspired. So you need to be inspired. And if everything goes under the radar, then who will know? Who will be inspired to do more and to show that when you give, you actually achieve things? So I think it is very important to continue to promote visibility. It doesn't have to be from the person itself. It can be from the people around them. It can be from the partners who speak about the wonderful achievements of a person. That person, if they want to stay modest, can be. But then others, our duty and the fund's duty is to show and to highlight what has been done in order to, as you rightly said, be a catalyst to providing more support to children everywhere.
Absolutely. And on that topic, just want to go into to Saeed here and talk about the concept of collaboration, because of course, when we look at this fund, there's this great collaboration between Islamic Development Bank and Unicef. I mean, both are highly respected, internationally renowned organizations doing amazing work individually. But through this collaboration, we now have something unique. And I mean, how important is working together, working in collaboration between organizations? Saeed, are you, can we, I don't know if Saeed is still there. I believe Saeed is there, but I don't know where. There's so many images here. I get lost in the maze of screens. Yes. There you are, Saeed. I found you. But we need to unmute you. If Esquire can help to unmute Saeed for me, please. There we are. Esquire, can we just unmute Saeed Hussein Qadri, please? There we are.
Look, this is really great. Look, the power. There's no real gain in isolation. It's all about collaboration. The ones who are furthest away will keep going further away. COVID-19 pandemic has taught us that. It's the underprivileged are going to keep on getting and sharing more and more burden of the development crisis that we're facing right now. And how do we address them? How do we get to them? How do we reach there? We all need to get and form that chain. You know, it's almost like forming those ropes or chains where we basically get to the right people, right communities, far flung in very desperate situations. Many of them are IDPs. So to be able to do so, we need to have on-ground support. To be able to reach on-ground support, we need to be able to have a good channel across. And that is where collaboration, partnership, all of these things come through. And that's on the ground level, but also on the top level. There's a significant amount of potential, and we heard about that a lot. We heard some really inspiring work from Dr. Sonia bin Jaffer and others as well. How do we connect from the very top to the likes of Muzun, right? How do we connect that? There are many people who have already a lot of ability, and they've been giving to so many different people and organizations and institutions that they know. But are we reaching the likes of the people that we really want to reach to? And that's the power of coordination, collaboration, and connection.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, of course, when we talk about collaboration, we also need to make sure we listen to each other, right? So I just want to come to Dr. Sonia here, because I know we're all listening to each other, we all work together. Amazing.
I was kind of listening, right? So maybe that's why I kept getting muted. That's fine.
No, we want you to speak. We want you to speak, Saeed. But Dr. Sonia, I just want to come to you at this point, because of course, you know, I mean, it's a great collaboration. We've got the Al Khurair Foundation, we've got Global Muslim Philanthropy Fund. But you know, when we're collaborating, how important is it to listen to each other? Because of course, at one point we could be donor-led, because a donor says, "I really want this to happen, and it has to happen this way." And then you have a programs team in a international aid organization which says, "Well, actually, no, we think you should do it this way. We've listened to us because we've got the expertise." So, how do you deal with that kind of scenario?
Thanks for the question. I actually think that it's probably a really fine balance, and not enough people give deep thought to this particular balance question. It's really funny because, you know, God gave us one mouth and two ears for a reason. We definitely listen to our partners, and I'll tell you what, being a donor, if you're a donor with good intentions, it's nice. But as a former evaluator, impact evaluator for these kind of projects, I used to sit in between that space. And what's funny is I used to think a donor is just a person with money, with a good intention, and that's it, unless they have a good partner on the ground, right? And a partner on the ground who doesn't have the funds to do what they want to do is a person with great ideas and operational ability and good intentions, but can't get it done. So the idea that one is more important than the other, to me, just doesn't exist. We need each other. And I think that's the true spirit of collaboration. And I'll give you an example from REF. When COVID hit And this is initially, and the pandemic started to shut down the centers, for example, the Makani Centers. It would have been real easy for us as donors to say, well, we approved those budget lines the way they were, so either get them done or we just will withhold our funds, and then you can go ahead and do another round and see what else you can do. Now, that would certainly protect my bureaucratic accountability mechanisms, but be useless to the people we want to really help, the real intended focus of our help. So what we did is we actually just went to our partners and said, what can you do operationally? What do you need to change? And because we have several partners, we had the advantage of being able to say, did you know these people were doing this? Did you know this group was doing this? Could you do this? No, that context doesn't work. What else? And then they would come to us and say things like, well, you know, the budgets need to be shifted. So we said, what do you need to shift? A transportation budget was no longer needed. We needed to be able to get devices and broadband, and we needed to get permissions from governments to get the device. So there was all these pieces, and then we realized that there was a whole component of culture with regards to allowing girls online with certain families, or they wouldn't even access it. And we wouldn't have known that had our partners not been forthright and honest with us, that there was a problem that needed to be solved and that the current models were not working. And we needed to listen to that and say, okay. And we have certain expertise when it comes to operational logistics, and they have certain expertise when it comes to programming. And we just shared that. And we're truly partners. We're not, you know, like I said, otherwise we're just some people with money and a smile. Like, who cares? Like, honestly, I mean, Muzun, you wouldn't have cared if you know, that was how donors acted. And I think that, you know, to me, that's the truest piece of Islamic financing, when you actually help the way somebody needs to be helped, not the way you choose. It's a true sense of humility, which goes back to the root of the word, for me anyways.
Oh, very deep and very powerful, and I completely agree with you, Dr. Sonia. We do have a question from Veronica, well, I'm glad you've enjoyed it, Veronique. You said you're honored to attend your first session. Please do attend. There's going to be more and more of these. But I think the gist of the question is how can one get involved? And I think Veronique is asking is how can we become more involved to provide support focused on mental health, well-being, training, coaching, mentoring, etc., etc. Perhaps we go to Tanya for that, because I guess, you know, if people do want to, because obviously we have one type of person who wants to support from, say, a financial perspective, and it's very easy. We would say to them, here's, you know, connect with us, make a donation, let's form a strategic partnership. But there's also a lot of people who say, well, actually, I'd like to give, I want to learn from a programmatic perspective. I want to be working in the field directly. How does one go through that journey?
Well, it depends where you are. UNICEF has a full internship program or volunteer program. So, you know, people can easily access that and come and work. There's also something called the Young Professionals Program in the UN, where you can come and work at the UN. But also in country, what we have is, and we've done a massive, Jordan has been one of the first countries to really do it at a large scale, is run a volunteer program. We set up a volunteer program for youth in Jordan. And so it's sort of a matching program between youth and opportunities. And originally it was a youth and sort of more private sector opportunities, but then we actually discovered that youth could contribute very much to their communities through this platform. And so even under COVID, for instance, this platform became a platform that was being used for youth to offer their services to people in their communities if they needed help. So I'm sorry, I don't know who Veronique is, but depending on who you are, there are many different opportunities for how you can contribute. Now, in the chat, you mentioned sort of some big goals, which are how communities can become more self-sufficient and self-managed. I think those are clearly a goal for all of us. And I think we described at this point how individuals can become more self-sufficient in terms of, you know, accessing vocational training or learning opportunities that can then take them on to be able to be employed and be able to contribute. But How communities can become better self-managed and self-sufficient is a complex question. And we obviously work with some parts of that community to do that, but it's very much a holistic perspective if you really want to get the true answer for how that can happen. And it depends the level of vulnerability too, to be very honest. I mean, particularly we work here in Jordan with a very vulnerable historical community called the Dom community, which are sort of like the Roma of the Middle East. And for the first time, actually, this is another success story. The Makanis are the first time that we've managed to get Dom children to access educational learning. Because usually they've always shied away from those types of institutions and been ostracized from schools. And not only them, but also their parents have now started to access sort of literacy programs through the Makani. So, but yeah, no, we'd be happy if, I don't know, Veronique or somebody, you know, reach out to Unicef and we can see if we can help provide further information.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tanya. I think Veronique is in South Africa. This is what I've just said.
Oh, okay. So UNICEF has an office in South Africa. You should approach South Africa. Absolutely.
And I just want to say hello to El Noor, who was actually one of the key components behind establishing this Global Muslim Philanthropy Fund. Just seen a message from him. He says, I'm glad to attend this panel and wish success to the new team who is working on the fund. So I guess that the message is for you that Abdurrahman is wishing you all the best, yourself and Saeed, of course, who are now leading the charge with the Global Muslim Philanthropy Fund there. Fantastic. Now, I suppose we are coming close to the end of our program today. And I just want to ask a couple of final questions, actually. Firstly, again, coming back to yourself, Tanya. Tanya, you've obviously been working in the field. You've been in Jordan, in Costa Rica, and many other countries. You've seen a lot. You've seen a lot of change. You're in the midst of a lot of things that are going on. What gives you hope?
Education. To put it really very simply, because my background is I started working for the Red Cross when I was young, and so I've done nothing but conflict zones for most of my life. And having gone from sort of the humanitarian life-saving interventions, the one that really gives me hope is education. And someone like Monsoon or others can tell you, you know, you can, obviously people need food, shelter, security first, but what can really change lives is education. So, and I think, you know, as a woman too, I think women's education and girls' education in particular, but especially in this context and the, you know, this part of the world, so making sure that our girls are educated. And, you know, Jordan's another story because you have a very high level of education in Jordan, but none of the women work. So it's not just education, it's also providing all the necessary framework so that women can work and really contribute.
Oh, so. Excellent. Another question there, which is regarding tracking records and result from Saeed, who says, I believe the point by example, inspiring or allowing others to emulate is very important. Track records and results do have an impact on resource mobilization, even in the private sector. It may be a good idea to have a platform where good stories from donors can be accumulated and shared. How does that resonate with the speakers? Let's go to, shall we go to, actually, I was going to go to say it on our panel, but I think we may have unmuting issues on that side. So I don't know if Esquire, can you, or Abdurrahman, would you like to take that question?
Can you repeat it, please? That's it.
So it's a question about, would it be a good idea to have a platform where good stories from donors can be accumulated and shared?
Communication is absolutely essential. Absolutely essential. There's no resource mobilization without good communication. And for that, you need to have stories, and human interest stories are the most important ones. So showing examples of in the field of what Muslim philanthropy has done is absolutely essential. Again, what I missed to say before about being discreet is that we don't measure Muslim philanthropy. There's so much flux of money that is given through Muslim philanthropy that we don't see, that we don't know about, that deserves to be recognized. And through stories like that, modest stories, but impactful stories on platforms everywhere, that will definitely help to inspire. There's no resource mobilization without good communication.
No, absolutely. No, thank you so much. And our final question for the session is for Mazoon. Mazoon, we have a question for you. Now that you've graduated, that you've graduated in international politics, what next?
Thank you. So this is for me a bit confusing because I'm still not sure. The next step, I'm doing my master. This month, I'm starting my postgraduate studies. So this is something really obvious, but I'm thinking about a job. So I'm not sure what I'm gonna do next. So I'm thinking maybe do something in media, but yeah, there is still nothing I'm sure about. But definitely I'm doing my master, and we'll see in terms of jobs. So yeah.
Inshallah. Well, we know you're an extremely inspirational individual, and I'm sure there'll be many jobs lined up for you. I'm sure when you come to Unicef, we'll find something. That shouldn't be a problem. Look, thank you to all of the panelists. Thank you to Abdurrahman, to Saeed, Dr. Sonia, Tanya, and Mazoon for taking out the time and with us today. Thank you to all of our guests. The team at Esquire, the team at ISDB, Margaret, Dr. Al-Maraki, everyone behind the scenes who helped put this together. And of course, my apologies if we didn't get a chance to answer yours last week. We just don't have any more time. Now, alhamdulillah, one thing we've realized is that the Global Muslim Philanthropy Fund, it truly is an innovative initiative. And we can see the positive impact it's already having. No doubt there's going to be many more children who will be empowered as a result of this and lifted out of poverty. And just like the great example we have seen with Mazoon today, I pray that we see many more children go on to become leaders, to have a good, solid education, become leaders in their respective field, and become a voice for the many who are out there. Because truly, when we speak on their behalf, when we advocate on their behalf, and when we educate everybody around the world, will things change for the better. And that's our vision. Now, as mentioned earlier, the recording is available on YouTube for ease of reference. I'm hoping the streaming went smoothly, so we can come back to that. And apologies for the little gremlin. I think it was a bit of a technical issue midway. We do apologize for that. Now, if you do wish to learn more about the Global Muslim Philanthropy Fund for Children, please do visit the UNICEF website. You can always Google Global Muslim Philanthropy Fund and it comes up straight away. This series of dialogues will continue, and the next seminar will be part of the Islamic Finance for the SDGs Global Summit on the 20th of September during the UNGA, that's the UN General Assembly. So do keep an eye out for the next session, and remember to join. It will, of course, be gripping and intuitive, as we have no doubt become accustomed to throughout this series of events. Now, all that's left for me to say is thank you once again to all of our panelists, and thank you all for attending. We hope that we see you all again soon. Take care, and assalamu alaikum.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.